I call this meeting to order.
Hey, good dabbling. Okay, so if you don't mind, it's been a long time since this committee has met.
Don't we have to do remote participation for Tony?
I don't think there's any voting that's happening, but it never hurts. Somebody, we don't have the motion ready because we had to do all that tech stuff, so.
I move that Tony Townsend participate in this meeting remotely due to personal circumstances,
Driving.
personal travel.
Second.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
There you go. Okay, so this committee hasn't met in quite a while, and Peter and I talked a little bit about what the agenda should look like and what the discussions should be, and so I don't want to micromanage it too much and to drive it. I'd like to have the committee introduce themselves because we've got some new faces, and then staff give a little update to the committee on kind of what's going on here, and then we'll just have I think a broad discussion about what we're doing here and what this committee should be working on, what our goals can be. So we've talked about some things to share here from staff to the board members on the committee, but then after that, I think we're looking at a broader conversation. So I'm David Plunkett, director of JMRL, and I'm a member of all board committees. With me is?
Fred, I run the Digital Media Lab Makerspace. I also work with the Marshall Avenue Community Network.
Kayla Payne, Collections and Technology Manager, supervise digital services, IT, and technical services.
I'm Sarah Elizabeth. I am the web manager, digital services coordinator, basically all the web presence minus social media.
I'm Mike Powers, trustee for Albemarle County.
Martha Ledford, trustee for Green County.
Peter Morville, trustee for Albemarle.
Joining us remotely is Tony Townsend, board president and trustee from Albemarle. Okay, so like I said, I think a few updates from the staff that are here, and then I kind of pulled out a few things from the policy manual and from the 5-year plan about technology to kind of kickstart a conversation about where we want to go here. But I'm going to start with Kayla, who came to the board since the last meeting of the tech committee and gave a CE on basically everything with a plug at JMRL. So she's here to kind of refresh us on that or update us.
Yeah. So in that last presentation, we included stats about public PC usage, printing, wireless usage. All of that's been pretty consistent, I think, over the last year. Some new things to report. We've upgraded the children's computers across 6 branches. We know these as AWE computers, which stands for Advanced Workstations in Education. They're these offline, all-in-one computers that have a bunch of games geared towards early literacy. So we have either upgraded upgraded the old models and added new ones, or in some branches that did not have any, added the AWEs to their platform. So that was at Northside, Crozet, Central, and Gordon last year, and then this year we did Louisa and Green. Nelson and Scottsville we're still working on some things for there. Scottsville in particular doesn't quite have the space for these computers, but so we're working on some other ideas for them. Last February, March, we installed the 24-hour kiosk in Nellysford, and we're working on avenues to allow holds to be sent to be picked up within that kiosk. It is a kind of like a vending machine that allows patrons to browse items that are in that kiosk and check out. And those are, extra copies of new bestsellers, some movies, things for children, teens as well. We've expanded the locker capacity and had a vinyl wrap installed at the Gordon Avenue Library locker. That we've seen a big increase in the usage of the number of items we're able to check out. Gordon was they were holding things off from putting things in there because they just ran out of space. So now Gordon is on par with Crozet in terms of the number of lockers available. So 39 lockers at each of those, and the other 4 locations that have lockers can fit a maximum of 17 patrons stuff, more books within the locker than just one, but So that's helped to increase some of the expanded access for our patrons in terms of and kind of continuing the trend of curbside in a way. They can just pull up, check it out and go. And then one other thing that we've done in the last year that's kind of digital services tangential, but more on the PR side, is we've migrated our email newsletter from MailChimp to Vega Promote, which is it's integrated within our catalog system and the notification platform that we use to automatically send people notices about their holds, when things are overdue, reminders like that. So yeah.
So we have more customization over that now. We can send messages. We can send, if you've got a late book or something, the message can be like, also come to our program. Return your book, but come do this thing.
Yeah, we can use that kind of email footer space to advertise. Right now it's advertising Wowbrary, which is kind of another thing we've launched, which is it's a new materials newsletter that goes out weekly on Saturdays, and it pulls directly from the catalog to let people see what's coming up new.
Okay, thanks, Kayla. Sarah, you want to share?
So in June 2023, we launched a new JMRL.org.
Formerly known as Beta.
Yeah, formerly known as Beta. Basically, it was a new CMS, revamped information architecture, revamped content, the works. That was launched in June 2023. For the rest of June, or for the rest of 2023 was cleanup and fixes, improvements for the Find It catalog, because along with the launch of the new website, we made the primary catalog interface, or discovery layer, the Find It catalog, which is just a more polished version in terms of user experience or user interface. We still have our classic catalog available, but we made the Find It the primary experience. And then we made improvements based on user feedback, based on now that everyone was using this stuff, we made improvements for the rest of 2023. In 2024, we did some more improvements of the whole architecture. We migrated our blog to our new host from being hosted at WordPress. We made some structural improvements again to the Drupal site. It's an ongoing, now it's an improved tool that we could make these improvements, which was a lot more difficult with our previous website. And our previous website also housed our staff intranet. And with the launch of the new website, the intranet needed to be rebuilt as well. It was still the old one. And so 2024 was taken up with a lot of review of content, information architecture, evaluating where to build this within the public site or in another site, and how to simplify support for the whole thing. We decided on a Google site to be within our Google Workspace, which is what we already had as a tool. And we integrated that with since all our staff use Google accounts to log in to use email and everything, that is our new security to our intranet. Before, the intranet was a shared password, login password that everyone used and been the same thing for 20 odd years.
Including trustees.
Yes. So no security. Basically, the security was no security. So we revamped our staff directory using Google since it was already there, which all this is simplifying maintaining the content. We weren't having duplicative content everywhere. So we rebuilt the intranet, revamped the staff directory to make it more usable and to use one source of truth for the information. And went through reviews and launched that all in 2024. Lots of other stuff was going on, but that was the big project of 2024, is to follow up and really retire the old website, which was the public facing and the intranet. That was finally finished and launched in December 2024, so a month and a half ago. And Along with that, that also had some improvements to the public facing site for the policy manual, which kind of goes hand in hand. Again, single source of truth. So we were trying to do some simplifying of all the content, public and internal. And what else did all this comprise? It was a lot of stuff.
Number of tickets.
Well, overall, along with all that going on, just for the website maintenance and such, there were 2,298 tickets, help desk tickets. 76% of those were just for content maintenance. So the calendar and just content. That's a massive improvement just because it's easier to maintain this content. So now we have more flexibility. We can actually have some dynamic content on our website, which we did not have before because it was more rigid and difficult to maintain. So with better systems, we have more maintenance or just updates. So yeah, and now we're in 2025 and again, some more improvements, cleaning up loose ends. And actually, we're getting a lot of feedback on the internet to improve it and just make it a more viable tool for staff, especially when new staff come on, so they can find the tools and information they need. So that's been the big focus. And we're planning on new projects and things to head up for 2025.
Can you, just to make it a little more concrete, give me an example of a content ticket that previously had to be done manually and now can be done by the end user without going through IT internally? And are there examples of ones where they still need to go through IT internally?
All content goes through IT.
Okay, so it's faster for IT to implement the ticket, but
Yes.
there's still, the infrastructure improvement haven't included sort of CMS permissions for end users to
Correct.
update things. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Where there was an improvement on that was halfway through with our calendar system. We now have an interface for staff to submit all their calendar events. But there still is an approval process to make sure that all the content is standardized.
Yeah.
All the fields are filled out because and just everything is set correctly. It's just another set of eyes.
Yeah.
So it does go through IT.
From a calendar, just because you mentioned that, and that's probably a lot of the updates. Does that require sort of technical expertise to do that set of eyes, or could
Not necessarily.
So we've chosen internally that IT is the set of eyes for calendar, but it could be some other
I
manager.
think it's also a
probably.
licensing thing.
Okay.
Pay for access per user,
I see.
basically.
Okay.
That was part of it when it was set up, 10 years ago.
Okay.
That was-
And this is still Trumba?
Yes.
Yes,
still true.
yes.
Thanks.
Which is, Trumpa is something that JMRL will be talking about, I think. It is. Kayla mentioned this morning that we have a series of 1-year renewals left on the contract with it. So I think it's a good time to start looking now that we've got some stability on the webpage to see if there are tools that better meet things, or see if there are other products out there that are approach the problems differently. Anything else, Tara?
That's in a nutshell. I have a long list, but that was a nutshell.
This is big strokes.
Yes. Yes.
Fred, what do you got?
Yeah, so honestly, I just wanted to take the time to thank the library system and the board for supporting the development of emergency technologies for our community and that being a priority here. I've really loved seeing that. So our makerspaces are currently in that 1 to 3 year sort of startup phase is what they sometimes call it in the makerspace research. Basically that it is in sort of and this phase kind of involves stuff like training staff on equipment, instructional design, safety protocols, legal, what you sign to say when you break all of our stuff, all that good stuff, developing programming, adjusting space layouts to maximize functionality. How do we rethink our current spaces to contain these equipment and services? And so one of our primary challenges with that is retaining skilled staff and determining a sustainable level of responsibility for existing staff to support these services, which, so in January 2024, you can kind of see it behind you, if you stare through the window, there's a soft launch of our Northside Teen Makerspace, and since its opening, teens have accessed the space over 150 times. They have access to what would otherwise be cost prohibitive tools. And it's also a great social space for them as well, with crafting tools and materials and sort of a safe, tactile environment. And then in May 2024, I came on board, and when I joined the Makerspace at Central was in its early stages and faced several significant challenges. So many staff members were unfamiliar with the setup, maintenance, and use of the equipment. So while I've been able to address many of these issues personally, this approach isn't sustainable for the long term. So staff turnover has led to some loss of some of that expertise that we've even developed since I started. And that's one of the big things we're fighting against. But our current facility is at the JMRL Central Makerspace, which is the one that I am helping patrons at every day, has 3D printers and scanners, Adobe Suite, digital design products, button making, Cricut, which is a smart cutter, Glowforge is a laser cutter, sewing machine, and we also do digital conversions. You bring in your VHS tape and we'll convert it for you. And the one behind you also has a sewing machine for teens, and they'll go through how do you make your own bookmark, and lots of fun programming and stuff like that. And so that's been part of the fun of getting it off the ground, is determining what those spaces look like, and what each space looks like comes out of that physical space that it transformed out of, right? So the space at Central was historically a computer lab, and so it's sort of been reimagined as this Makerspace Digital Media Lab, and so it leans a little bit into that digital media lab aspect because of its history as this space to go for computing, as well as having those manufacturing devices as well now. And so the north side, if you see, it's literally the teen room. Sorry, I keep pointing behind you guys. But so it sort of grew out of that as this sort of teen space, where people and where children can learn to have access to this technology. And then also at Nelson, it actually grew out of their business center. So it's sort of more focused on helping people have access to these technologies as adult professionals they wouldn't otherwise have access to, a poster printer or a photo printer, or document scanners and book scanners and some of those other devices. So one of the things that we've done, so the next steps is just actually this week, in January 2025, the public appointments for the Nelson Makerspace are now open on Tuesdays and Fridays from 10 to 4. And we're still rolling out equipment at the Nelson branch as they have 3 new staff members. And so it's just that ongoing challenge, but it's really exciting. And we've seen it's been just such a wonderful impact to witness the profoundly positive patron stories that we get to see every day. And just been amazing to see how it impacts people every day.
And for the trustees here, the policy for Monticello Avenue, which is the former lab and web hosting service,
Right.
is up for review this year. So when the board comes to the Central Library for their May meeting, Fred will provide a little bit more detail on a CD, and then also we'll do a tour of the space there. So you can come anytime, but.
Yeah, and I didn't really touch on that. Yeah, so we also do community web hosting for local nonprofits as well, and have a website with local resources as well as part of that. So part of what we do is, yeah.
And that's something that for years we've been having conversations about. We've seen usage of that service drop over time, and we're still hosting hardware for it. Kayla was at City Hall at 7 a.m. on Sunday morning as part of a power switchover project they had, and we have a server there that's hosting these things, and we're kind of maybe it's time to help those organizations transition to other tools that are out there. The role that the library served 20 years ago maybe can transition into something more of a kind of
education
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
actually the resource,
instead of being the actual
the
hosting
service,
resource.
because there's many alternatives now. Yeah, so we'll discuss that when we
I think
review the
that's
policy.
worth-
Seems
that's
like
worth
the
it.
right time.
And we're in the process, we've been on a hiring panel to fill a position in the lab that's been vacant for almost 3 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so
we're,
2 of those positions that were open when we started, that we're in the, we filled one a couple months ago when we're in the process of filling just like even within the last couple of months and now getting back up. to-
Lab services, when it was strictly lab, were largely, it used to be they followed the same hours as the central library. During COVID, those got shortened a little bit. We lost staff there. We had the retirement of the head there, and they have been shorter than the, I still don't think it would be 9 to 9. We're never gonna have staff, I think, to get back to that, but the goal now is to offer 9 to 5 throughout the week. Service, and then by appointment only.
And so I think part of that is like what does emerging technologies mean now? And like, how can you be an emerging technologies librarian, like as we move forward as an organization and like and can like honor what we have done and sort of see where that looks like in the future.
And some of that future might be, programming. Some of the reference staff are looking at programming based on AI or tools. I got an email from one of our database vendors that Help Now. It provides sort of tutoring and job help, resume building. They have a tool now where you can learn about like ethical use of AI for like academic and for other tutoring type stuff. So we're keeping an ear to the ground on that.
Is there an age limit on that? Because the homework now is designed for high school age.
So Help Now is
All ages.
is all ages. I think it has a component of that homework help for younger, but because there's Help Now, Job Now, and Vet Now are the three that the state provides.
Yeah, and that program that Abby and I are doing is on Valentine's Day weekend. Yeah. On AI.
Okay.
So just a
yeah, go ahead.
follow-up question that focuses more on things that Fred just described. So some of this, the makerspace services and facilities like Glowforge and so forth, I think are newish within the last year, I think is what I just heard. What are we doing to spread awareness through our user base about those? And then how do we kind of measure or understand the reach of that awareness over time?
Yeah, I think that they have been at all 3 locations in a very drawn out soft launch, while we were getting the physical materials, we were getting staff.
Yeah, you don't want to crowd at the door on day one anyways.
Right. So I think that these are part of the strategic planning moving forward. Like how do we, once we have, okay, we're stable, we've got it ready, you can come in and use it, opening it up to the public. But it has been a bit of a trial and error to figure out like what we can and can't provide, how in depth that needs to be.
I'm just struck by, as a trustee, I'm a strong insider.
Yeah.
And I always am learning all the time about, I didn't know the library could do that. So the arm's length patron, I can only imagine that they're kind of aware of a fraction. And I just want, we're putting resources into these great services, I want them to have people to know about them the most possible.
And
I agree with that. I think that there is a significant need for additional information going out to the public about what services are available, what materials are available. I mean, I constantly, people are surprised to find out that there's Canopy or magazines or,
That's an
online
ongoing issue that
Yeah, go ahead.
every webinar that I get from ALA or whatnot is called, why are people surprised by the things they don't know about the library? So JMRL could do a better job of that. And I think we've made great strides. I mean, Mike, for years, you were talking about the need for kind of a services documentation.
I'll still talk about it if you want.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to it, but we're in a lot better place with that than we were strictly on the web presence, but still that's a passive, like somebody has to come and ask for that or look for that. Fred, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I think that for at least for my department, one of the things that we've been doing is we run a monthly teen program, and one of the things that we do is each month we introduce the teens to one of the new devices. And so skill building as well as introducing them concurrently is one of the ways that we're addressing that gap. I was also working with our former PR head Jennifer before she left, and then now with Dylan about promoting some of those wonderful stories. There was a social media post that went out about the person, there was a patron who used the service to engrave cutting board with a deceased family member's recipe So it's sort of, if you're looking at the calendar, if you're looking at our social media, like you might be getting some of those pieces of information. But I do think it's like something to look forward.
I think that's the point here. I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth, but that a lot of it is like, if you are already tuned into, like the patrons that are walking into Nelson are aware of what's available there.
Right.
But how do you bring in the folks that?
And we do get people who submit the contact form. I counted at least 7 over the past 2 weeks. I think that maybe went to Fred or asking about the equipment. So I think we do have a page on the website for the digital. I think people who are looking, some people who are looking for it are finding it and reaching out and hopefully coming in.
Yeah, there's been like
to-
over 300.
Yeah.
And also, it's a bit of a different type of service for JMRL. It's because we cannot, you have to physically be, for the most part. There are some things that we can do remotely for you. You have to physically be at one of those 3 locations. So if you're a green patron, you'd have to come to Northside or Central or to Nelson to use it. Until we get to a point where we have some things that we can roll out that are mobile, and that they have the staff to manage that as well.
In the space,
And the space, right?
And it does seem
the
that
final
that's-
frontier.
some of the stuff, some of the most cutting edge stuff in the makerspace, there's definitely the opportunity there for stories that like, could have some interest in TV, for instance. Like we just over the Christmas break, we had a friend of ours in Scottsville, their daughter is creating these beautiful 3D, she has her little home 3D printer. I don't even think it was that expensive. And she's creating like these animals and sculptures. And it was an eye opener for me to just see like the diversity of what she was creating as a 10-year-old at home, right? And so I'm sure that with some of this higher, more expensive high-end equipment and right, like someone really young doing something really creative is the kind of thing that like, would probably make for a great TV story, like a news thing, and would be a way of getting people who are not necessarily coming to the library.
Not only that, I think it makes a big impact on our jurisdictional funding partners as well, to
Yeah.
hear that kind of story about how people are using the libraries in ways that they hadn't maybe put those dots together, so. Okay, well, I just had a few things that I pulled out of sorry guys, I'm the only one who gets to share. Out of the strategic plan. Just to show, so this group didn't meet during most of that planning process, so most of the input here came from the 5-year plan committee, the board strategic planning committee, and then some from the staff technology advisory committee. But the strategic plan goal associated with technology, so the kind of bigger picture one is JMRL will facilitate discovery and delivery of a wide range of materials in a variety of formats. The library will adopt new technologies to meet the changing needs of the community. So that's it's very broad.
And I don't mean to interrupt your flow,
go for
but just to make sure I understand the context and everyone else. The 5-year plan was sort of a very high level document, and then it's backed up by some other documents.
Yeah.
And what are the names of those documents and
The
plans?
staff implementation plan.
Okay, and is that what this is, or is
The
this?
top one there, the one I just read, is
Yeah.
from the actual 5-year plan itself, so the board level document, that came
Yep.
from this one here. The
Yep.
rest of them are gonna be from here's how we're gonna meet that goal, which is the staff implementation
And
plan, which is
is-
linked right under.
Okay, so that's publicly available. And the document you're reading from right now, is this your re-summary of
Yeah.
the 2?
This
Okay,
is just pulling things out.
okay, it's just for this meeting,
It's just for
basically.
this meeting,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
It's the things that are in either the board 5-year plan, which is this 2-page document, or in the staff implementation plan, both of which are available at jmrl.org/future. It's an easy one to remember. The plan strategy, which is also in the board level documents, provide equitable access and training for existing and emerging technologies. And all the rest of these are the staff level implementation, which is the kind of parallel document that you described. Mike.
And I guess we could pop it open or not, but does the staff implementation plan have a technology chapter, or is it sort of interleaved with?
These are interwoven because in the past there was a separate technology plan. That was one of the goals. Technology was the goal basically. This year, the strategic planning committee, the 5-year plan committee, instead used JMRL's mission and values as the high level
Framework.
categories. But yeah, the framework's a good way to put it. So these were picked from various different frameworks. And you can dig through, you can see that all in that implementation plan here. Where it's, here are the goals, and underneath each one, there's a little key that says. There's a key that
This is
says,
near the top.
red are the goal, blue is the strategy, purple is the objective, and then green is the key performance indicator, like how we're gonna know we got there. So these are all pulled directly from that document. Okay, just quickly, collect GIS and demographic data on the region to help make data-driven collection management decisions. And each of these has a time frame for it. Continue to improve the JMRL website and catalog experience, except that one, which is an ongoing goal. Refresh the staff intranet. We are well in advance of that goal. That wasn't padding the stats. When this was written, that was still a twinkle in Sarah's eye. So. Offer regular tutorials or info sessions at branches on emerging technology, as well as refreshers on existing technology for the public. Increase patron access to JMRL's Makerspace and digital media labs, including adding needed services and equipment annually. So that's a little bit of that conversation we were just having about, increasing access to me also means increasing awareness. Increase patron awareness and access to hybrid meeting room technology through improved documentation and staff training. Increase support for building digital navigation capacity in JMRL's patrons, potentially including partnership with outside agencies to provide direct technology training to users. JMRL is a member of the coalition known as Broadband.
The Regional Digital Equity Plan.
Regional Digital Equity Plan, which includes all 5 of our jurisdictional partners and various other service providers in the area. And there's a lot of talk there about digital navigation. And in fact, broadband, Albemarle's Office of Broadband has stationed some of their digital navigators for like office hours at certain branches. So they have been at Northside where you could come and meet with somebody one-on-one from Albemarle County to learn digital navigation skills, and at Central a little bit. So there's more talk about future.
How are you defining digital navigation?
So the original job of the broadband office there was all about connectivity. Right, like we're going to help you get connected to broadband at your home. And as we've seen throughout not all of our service region, but a big deal of it, the availability of broadband, then it was about, okay, how do you help people pay for that? Like there are various programs available. And then after that, it was how do you make people digitally literate, basically. Okay. So you now have access to high-speed broadband in your area. How can you use that to create email accounts, types of things that libraries have been doing forever, help make resumes, apply for jobs, have a Zoom meeting, become digitally literate. So that's something.
So you might just call it digital literacy.
You could, the phrase that's being used for the funding partners. There's a tremendous amount of state and federal resources being put towards this now, and a lot of that is going towards digital navigation. Maybe I'm not doing a good job of explaining what navigation is, what that means, but that's my understanding of it.
And so is that stuff taught by JMRL staff or by?
No, at this point, that partnership is the Office of Broadband at Albemarle County, although our staff are doing this type of work on a daily basis at every location.
Do they get what they're teaching? Like, do they know it? I mean, that's like it's a library thing. It's being taught by non-library people. It's weird.
I mean, I don't see it as necessarily like the library owns that thing.
Yeah.
We're providing space, access to a stable network. We're also offering these things, like you can sign up to do a tech tutorial for any device that's here now. But what it does is expand our capacity to do it. We don't have the time or the staff to do this.
And in some cases, it's helping them connect with like social services as well, helping them navigate, because I think part of that is the nature of a lot of the applications that they're seeking are online.
I was just curious about the qualifications of the people who are teaching this stuff, because if it is a library thing to be teaching digital literacy and to have technology people like, or government people teaching digital literacy is just odd to me.
And primarily what they like, especially like at Central, like a lot of what they've done is that sort of that specialized knowledge set to like connect people with like, you know, reduced like cost access to broadband services. And that's like a level of specialized knowledge like we library staff don't necessarily have.
Right.
And that like sort of like, and then, you know, I personally went to high school with one of our digital navigators. She's lovely. I'm not that that's a recommendation. But I don't think that they are our community partners. They are our library patrons in a lot of cases. And I think that that's like a good feedback, but
Are library staff like, is library staff kind of involved to the extent that we know what they're teaching and
Not necessarily, no. It's use of the space.
Okay.
This is a broader, this says potentially including partnership with outside agencies. I see this as a way to potentially partner for more library staffing that would be doing this as well. So if all of a sudden if Greene County comes in and they've got funding that has been earmarked to provide digital navigation services, well, then certainly we could offer to house that employee. We could hire somebody and train them and then get some other services that would free up, you know, whoever was doing that, running around and helping people make emails and whatnot. So down the road, if there's an opportunity, I would love JMRL to be able to partner more directly with our jurisdictional partners on this. Right now, it's just Albemarle that's offering this service, and it's a like an office hours type scenario, so a drop-in scenario.
So I would just, we don't need to keep going on with this, but I would just highlight it as it's an area of sensitivity because, you know, I mean, even up till today, right? Like, you know, misinformation online has been a serious risk, and with what's going on with AI, and with social media, it's a heightened risk, I would say, and the library is perceived as like among the most trusted, you know, institutions in the country for, you know, where you can kind of go for trusted information. And so there's just a risk in there of people being confused about, well, like I learned this from the library. And so I just think it's an area to be careful about.
Yeah, I take your point there. I mean, I don't see it as being that much different from when we bring in outside expertise for any other number of programmings where, you know, we're vetting the organization providing it, not the individuals. So like with the health department, it's going to send in a nurse to talk about, you know, first aid care or whatnot. You know, we don't know that person's qualifications. We're trusting the health department here. So in this case, we're trusting our governmental partners, but I am interested in JMRL taking a more active step here if there's access to this funding that becomes available, where we could say, you know, if it's a way for our governmental partners to take money that is earmarked for these specific things and give it to help staff the library some more, and we can provide that level of training, then certainly that's what I would be most interested in, seeing an outcome that way. But I take your point. Yeah.
And I just looked back at some of the conversations we've had with our contact at the Albemarle accessibility office, broadband accessibility office. And his description is the digital navigator's goal is to guide clients through whatever challenges to digital access they're struggling with. It could be troubleshooting software or hardware issues. It could be helping with an online task like enrolling in the benefit or supporting a service or device purchase question.
So it sounds like it's more access and technology than information.
Yeah, maybe I misspoke.
Right.
A bit.
Yeah, helping them navigate the, you know, some of the online world or some of the hardware.
Okay.
And just, I'm not clear on what does it mean by access to hybrid meeting room technology?
This broken thing.
Yeah, so we have at all 8 branches now access to either something like this, which when working, it's a microphone and speaker so that people can have a meeting.
Okay,
And then there are other, a little bit bigger than that, but more similar to that at some of the other branches where you can bring it into a room and have, kind of like we are now, having a meeting.
combined physical.
Combine, yeah, and we did have a group last week use it for an all-day meeting kind of
Okay.
thing. They had
So
a
not
first-
virtual reality or augmented reality.
Although there is a VR headset in the lab if you ever want to
Okay.
play a game.
Yeah.
And come by and rent it. And we do also do digital literacy skills training by appointment, but again, it's just a capacity issue with like staffing.
To the hybrid meeting room, I think, Peter, we added a lot of this technology over the years, kind of in the middle, COVID and on, so that the library could continue to function. We could have library board meetings and things like that. And staff could continue to meet and communicate. And now that it's all in place, the focus is going to be on making sure that the public is aware that these things are available, because they're not it's not the plug and play that a lot of people would expect. If you go into the new $150 million Shannon Library, $120 million Shannon Library, like you can basically wave your hand and there's connectivity and it works. Well, ours takes a little bit more elbow grease. So it means training with staff beforehand. And I think taking some of the fear away from that, and both on the staff and the patrons end, to be like, oh, it's not, come learn about it and we'll show you how to do it. And keeping an eye towards like this seems like new technology, but it's already dated here.
Yeah.
Making sure that we do keep up with what's newest and next to it. I mean, right, we've got cords everywhere and that's not ideal. Just two more that were in there just to highlight these. Improve customer experience for credit card transactions, potentially through customer service training or new cash registers, card readers. So that falls in Kayla's world of everything with a plug. And create a regular schedule of IT visits to all locations, including re-engaging JMRL's tech liaison program. So that's kind of an inside baseball thing, but it's about training for our staff so that they can offer the best to the public.
And the new intranet has helped with that because we have now a tech toolbox that liaisons and just your regular day-to-day staff can go and if something's not working and they can't get a hold of IT. So that those are some of the things that we're working on.
One tool that we haven't mentioned that Fred is the kind of administrator for is called Niche Academy. And it's a video hosting service that initially we bought for staff training to make it a little easier to provide content so that JMRL can curate or create our own trainings on things and then push them out to all of our staff. But it also has a very public facing side too, so that down the road, that's a tool we could utilize for people who want to learn how to use the piece of equipment in a makerspace, that they could watch the video beforehand and feel a little bit more comfortable with it coming in.
And those are like publicly available to like library patrons already and linked in the like website under like some of our services, as well as some of our digital like databases and stuff like that. We've like been slowly rolling those out as well, like where there is capacity to do instructional design. Yeah.
And some of that we get out of the box from the provider, from the database company or whatnot. Managing that, same thing. We want to make sure that the information is good.
How many people are part of IT?
4 or 5. It kind of depends on who we count as IT. So me, and then we have an IT supervisor, Mary Ann, and then we have Jeff, who is the tech support specialist. And then, so 5 of us who tend to meet and then Fred
2
and Sarah.
desktop support,
Yeah,
1 digital services manager, the,
And I'm technically my
Lab.
own beast outside of IT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then Kayla helps everybody, so, but yeah.
When we use the phrase IT here, in my mind, we're thinking about Kayla and Marianne and Jeff, basically. So 3 full-time employees, because they're the ones, when we talk about IT, it's who do you call when something's broken? Where does the tech ticket go? And then Sarah on the website of that.
And then I'm assuming that in some percentage of things, you then have to call for support.
Yeah,
on
I have a-
specific software or systems.
Yes.
Or,
if we can't get that plugged in and turned on,
Yeah.
I have support to call from
Yeah.
that, who's helped install
Yeah.
it, so.
And on a high-level networking basis, we contract with the city of Charlottesville as part of our administrative services agreement. So I mentioned Kayla was at City Hall. Their senior network engineers help us manage our network, and they host some servers. We have much less than we used to, but currently at the data center there is our call manager, which runs phones for this location, Crozet, Central, and Gordon. There's the backup system known as the NAS. There's avenue.org,
That's it.
and that's it at this point. Okay, so that's kind of, I didn't mean to take quite that long, but I did want to, before Peter kick off with just an overall discussion, to point out there's a policy 1.23, which is board committees, I think it's called. And let me see. Well, this was brought up before we had to reboot all this computer. It's mention of what the technology committee is and what it does. It calls it a standing committee, and it has 3 subsets there. Promote technological vision for JMRL, ensure that operational decisions regarding technology are delegated, and work with staff to draft and update JMRL's technology plan as part of JMRL's strategic plan. So that's what the board has said that this committee should be doing.
So I have a question about scope.
Yeah.
Right, so we use the term information technology just now, talk about IT, but this committee is called the Technology Committee, and there's no information there. But we haven't so far talked about like the bookmobile, which is a giant chunk of technology. And so I'm just curious, just in terms of, right, are we mostly assuming this is an information technology committee? Or are there technologies that we're going to be talking about that are outside of information technology? I'm just kind of curious about,
It's a great question.
do we have a definition of scope, or do we want a definition of scope, or is it better to leave it fuzzy?
I think in the past we have focused on information technology. But to be honest, in my tenure as director, most of our conversations have been about the website for this committee specifically.
Yeah.
But I would say we heard about kiosks.
Yeah,
right,
So that was within the, at least intuitively, the boundaries. I think I would put into my intuition just all forms of infrastructure, technological infrastructure for making the library work. It's true that bookmobile is a technology, so is this pen. So at some point, there's something is recent enough where it's, I would draw the line somewhere past the bookmobile personally.
Well, I mean, and that's another phrase, right? Emerging technology,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is a little bit more looking at new things. But like HVAC, right? We're not talking about the HVAC system.
God, I hope not.
Yeah.
We're really out of my depth there. No, because our facilities are owned by our governmental partners.
Yeah.
JMRL does not own any facilities. Now, we work closely with them when there's an HVAC problem at whatever library, but
Right.
we are not responsible for
Yeah.
those.
So we don't have to answer this right now, but it would be helpful to come to some consensus on where we think the boundaries are,
Yeah.
or where, or like I said, or that we want it to be fuzzy because it allows, as things come up, for us to at least consider them. But what I don't want to do is operate on like overly narrow boundaries because we haven't even thought about it or
Yeah.
talked about it. And like the kiosk is an example of something that, right, there are parts of that are more like engineering technology and parts of it, right, but that does seem to be part of what we're talking about. And there's other dimensions too, like, right, technology that enables the library to function versus technology that is part of the collection, like in the Internet of Things, right? Is that something we would be talking about, or is that collections, right? So that sense of where are and I mean, from my perspective, the things that we talk about in this committee should largely be driven by the needs of the library, which are going to be articulated by the director and staff. So that will shape the where we end up placing focus will be kind of shaped on the needs of the library. But again, if we don't have a good sense of boundaries, we don't know what things to bring to this committee and not.
Go ahead.
I guess I would observe as you're talking, at some level, the people who are in the
Right.
technology component of
Yep,
JMRL
yep.
are working on certain things.
Yep,
So we've
yep.
already, that definition has already been
Right, by the body, people in the room.
been made in some, now it has been written down as a, a definition, I don't know, but emergently that has already, in some
Right.
sense, has happened.
Right. Although there could be someone that needs to be hired because
Sure.
it has skill
Yeah.
set that the library doesn't have.
Well, that's one thing, so thinking about, I think that's a good place to start this conversation, Peter, because I don't think that we have had a good definition for this committee or clear roles for what we wanted to do. Like policy committee, very clear, here's what the job is there. Budget finance committee, it's pretty clear. Personnel committee gets a little fuzzier too, but it still has like these kind of annual tasks and things that they work on. This one, I wasn't here in the beginning of this committee 20, 30 years ago or whatnot. My guess is it was probably project defined, like our IT. So Kayla's position is collections and technology manager. So traditionally it was probably head of technical services, which was cataloging, purchasing and cataloging materials. And then the very first computer that came into the library system was a catalog computer. So that person was in charge of that, and it all kind of rolled from there to whereas now, like that should probably be two different positions, right? So I don't think we have had a good definition. I think about the things that would be useful probably to help the staff put out the board's vision would be goal setting for this committee. I think one of the biggest places that we could use support here is in advocating for funding as well. That had occurred to me, like right now, the personnel committee meets prior to the budget finance committee and they make a recommendation. Here's what we think we should see for personnel. And any kind of technology personnel requests have gone that way. Well, maybe the technology committee meets prior to the budget finance committee and says, well, here are our goals for next year. And here's, we think we need these resources in order to make it happen, and let the budget committee then see if that could work. I think that there's, like, Mike, when we look at policies, we always start with, okay, do we still need this thing? I think there's a genuine conversation about, do we want to have a technology committee? I think that part of the three things that I just showed are all useful, and they help to provide the best service possible.
I have some thoughts there, but there's a hand raise, I think.
Oh, sorry. Tony, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a historical perspective, the original intent of the Technology Committee was to satisfy the federal requirement under the, whatever that connectivity fee is that we received.
Right.
We had to have a technology plan in place and submitted and many years ago. So
Tony, is that E-rate funding you're talking about?
thank you. That's the word I can never remember. Yes, E-rate funding. We needed to have a specific technology plan that had to be updated, I believe, annually back then in order to qualify for E-rate funding.
That rings a bell, because the strategic plan committee, when they were talking about kind of spreading out these technology goals a little bit, had me check with the state to make sure there wasn't still a requirement that we file a technology plan, and there no longer is.
Right, yeah.
If the state, not the federal government, requires one, go look. Thank you, Tony.
I'm meeting with E-rate tomorrow, so I can ask.
Okay, good.
Or E-rate Central.
Yeah, I can imagine the evolution of a technology committee and its focus, from the 90s through till today, for the start of like, oh, we need our first website.
Yeah.
I think, one thing seems clear is that, right, even when we use the word technology in general conversation, it tends to focus on whatever's new, right? And so it's the stuff, a refrigerator or an oven or dishwasher is not always considered technology anymore, and so, right now I would say that artificial intelligence and what's going on there is the new thing. It's like the website, the website of the 1990s. And there's a lot of ground that AI covers that has relevance to libraries. So to me, that jumps out as an area where I doubt that I doubt that even collectively within the library staff and board, there's a great sense of the full scope of stuff that AI is, has relevance to libraries.
But so I think that's an example. If you're, one characteristic of things that I would call technology is it moves fast.
Yeah.
And so historically, and I've been on this committee for more than 5 years, let's say, I think, we had our strategic plan, but then there was a separate, faster moving cycle. It was not exactly half as fast.
It was, yeah,
It was like 3 versus 5, I
It was
thought.
3, but the third year was shared.
Yeah, okay, so let's say twice as often, roughly speaking, you would update and review the technology plan, exactly because even when the 5-year plan was implemented a year ago, the stuff you just mentioned didn't really exist in a foreseeable way. And it's still not foreseeable to us, but we have a lot more visibility. So that segues me into a possible role or scope for the committee as a whole. And I'll just take a step back by saying I sort of reviewed the role of the board and trustees in the overall planning process. And on page 2, the board has a primary responsibility for the success of the library. This is the Public Library Trustees Handbook I'm waving around. On page 2, it's to ensure that objectives are met. It's a board responsibility. The board has a focus on these results by incorporating page 19, defined measurable results, which we did see in the strategic plan, and key performance indicators. Page 21, I'm just saying those in case it ever feels like looking up some of the things I'm referencing. So I think we could have a role. So I think there's a role for this committee in helping to review and adjust that plan more frequently, probably than the 5-year plan, but also a monitoring role where we defined a KPI and we said it was going to be FY 27. Let's look at all the things now for this 6 months that were supposed to be the first half of FY 25 and review the KPIs and where do we stand. And things move so fast, we're not going to hit all those. And some we're going to be in advance, which we heard about for the intranet, which is great. But I think I would state as a board more broadly, I don't think we do enough of that as we've been sort of guided to do. And I think at least in the subdomain of technology, one role here could be we carve off the technology portion of that and we start doing those monitoring evaluation process through this committee. So that's one vision, that I think could be useful.
One reaction I have to that is that the staff implementation plan, right, is procedural. So it can be more fluid than traditionally the 5-year plans have been like reviewed once a year by the board, and we might make a change. I remember in the last 5-year process, we might have made 2 changes in 5 years when it was like something dramatic either came up or went away. I can't remember what it was. But with that staff implementation plan, I think I am agreeing that if there's board or technology committee, like if something comes up, like a emergent LLM technology that wasn't quite where it was a year ago, we can add KSIs. We can get in there and add objectives. We can't change the board strategic vision without having the whole board vote on it.
But it's also framed broadly enough that
Yeah,
it gives you a lot of flexibility to change the implementation.
So I have been a little worried about that loss of the 2-3 year plans and a lot of the strategic, a lot of what Kayla's department does now, or what JMRL does for technology is really based on the overall strategic plan. It's not necessarily like there are goals there that in the past might have been very directly like buy this computer to do this thing. And now it's something like, connect people to resources and it flows from that. So I do think that there is some room there to add some very specific things that we think are achievable or need to happen or.
I think what I'm suggesting is just a little more granularity in the monitoring phase. And I do think based on what I've read about the planning process, that the board has a place to, at the board level, there's a place to participate in that kind of monitoring process. And it doesn't hurt to just, for the public and for the board, here's what we've identified are the, the priorities that we're working on. And just for everyone to kind of be on the same page with that.
Yeah, I think so that would mean kind of regular meetings where we crack open that same document and we give a little report on here's where we are.
Basically,
Here's
yeah.
what we've done, and here's why we're not gonna hit this one, or here's why this one's no longer relevant, or here's what we forgot or didn't realize.
And input into the process that you identified, which is the priorities might shift around. And board members here might have some input into, let's put some more thought into this.
Yeah.
And again, we're all working together. It's all collective. But yes, to me, that would happen 2 or 3 times a year, not 6 times a year, for sure.
We could draw that back to, I think quarterly we had said a while ago, but that was a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
I think that could draw back to the conversation about resources too,
Right.
like that if the committee recommends to the board or to the finance committee that like, we think this is important and we don't have the staff to handle this, or we need to have some tool.
Or draw one-time funds from the family of funds.
Or ask the CACF for support for project-based
Funding.
And
funding.
and that is how we got the AWE computers, the expanded locker
The
kiosks.
lockers, the kiosk, all those things kind of happen that way with this support of the Friends or fundraising initiatives. I meant to mention that when you were talking about the lockers, so thank you. And some of the lockers came from the state. They had federal funding during COVID, but the rest of them were all paid for by the library.
So, right, so put those kind of couple things together. Right, it would be good for us to be able to, it doesn't have to be the next board meeting, which is on Monday, right? But, right, we could be working towards being able to report out to the board as a whole. This is the scope of the technology committee. And one of the things we're going to be doing is looking at, by its nature, is looking at faster moving things, which may feed back into that, monitoring and evaluation process.
Yeah, that works for me. I mean, I think that we'll find that staff are already gonna be working on something, like, as something pops up, like if Mike talked about programming for AI and staff is working on programming for AI because we are hearing that from patrons or from people in the community. So to me, I think that this is just a good way to kind of codify some of these things and make sure that there's a.
And it feels like also that out of this committee and in our discussions, we may identify topics that would be good for continuing education for the board as a whole.
That would be great.
Right, because again, I have extremely mixed feelings about AI, so I'm not pushing AI, but it's a huge thing that's going on in our world right now. And, figuring out ways to kind of keep the staff, the board, and the public informed is a real challenge, right? Like right now, a lot of it's just individual initiative to try to figure out what's going on, how to make sense of it.
Yeah.
And it, among other things, has massive impact on the whole topic of digital literacy and being able to know what to trust and believe. And never mind that there's now massive numbers of books written by AI.
Yeah.
Well, we have had some conversations about that internally where we, there was a big conversation a month or two ago about libraries finding that there were audiobooks on one of the providers that were all AI created and written. And I think in the end, Meredith and I talked about it and looked at our new policy for collection management. We decided that, and we talked about this in the policy committee a little bit, decided that if we applied the same, as long as we're applying the same criteria or requirements for it, then we weren't going to necessarily say no just because it's not created.
Might be worth, it's an interesting side note, but it might be worth just making sure that consumer of that material is aware, yeah.
Well, that was, I think, what people were most upset about the vendor.
Yeah, they
with,
didn't.
is that it wasn't clear. It was given a name. It was an author's
Right.
name that they then.
That's
realized.
happening in the music world also.
Right, yeah. So I'm interested in that. I'm interested too in how it's going to impact, organizationally our workflow.
Yeah.
What tools are going to be available to us? What tasks are going to be in 5 years? Tasks that we're doing now and putting people towards are going to be AI tasks. So and how do we ensure that they're being done correctly?
Yep.
So yes, I think that's a good way to look at it, is that the board and the public and the library staff are gonna have to look at this together.
Yeah.
Cataloging is one we talked about recently. It's just kind of like a field that's kind of ripe
Yeah.
for innovation there, because it's very like rules based, and if this then that. So what does that mean?
Yeah, and it's amazing because, right, it's like it's so incredibly efficient and effective until it gets something really wrong and you don't even notice it. Yeah.
I did have one other, whenever we're through with the discussion of scope and purpose, I do have one other topic I want to throw, specific topic I want to throw on the table. So let me know when we're.
So
at
yeah,
that
well,
point.
just to wrap up with scope, I mean, what would be a way for us to start to move towards a definition of scope? Like what would be a good process for being able to have a few sentences that we would be able to share in terms of like how this what's the definition of this committee?
I think we'll just ask AI, right?
Right. just feed in the notes and it'll, yeah.
I think when it has come to things like this in the past, like when we looked at the mission statement, which is obviously a bigger thing, we did some kind of workshopping, just sat in a group and threw words at the table to see what stuck there.
Usually in policy committee, there's sort of a bullet point. We're just trying to get the points on the table, and maybe that happened today, or maybe it didn't. Then there's a draft that gets kind of formulated that incorporates that, and then everyone looks at it and has a more of a concrete thing to
I
wordsmith.
think that's probably the right workflow, is that we get this group together again and we're all looking at the same document and we put in here the things that we think need to be included, and then we try to draft a couple sentences to.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Do we want to look at other organizations' definitions of it?
If we can
Yeah.
find some, that's a good idea too. That's something else that policy committee does. It's a bit, that's not gonna be as easy to find as, people's mission statements are up on their webpage, but we can ask around to our peer libraries in the state.
A lot of times I'm finding that we're a little more organized than average, so we're not.
That just made my day. Mike.
Yeah.
A little more organized than
So
average.
the point is, there's not always great models to draw from.
So we're looking for other libraries, kind of scope for any technology committees. Or just,
And yeah,
ALA probably has one that might be useful.
and I would just throw that into the bucket of how do libraries perform planning specifically in their technology portion of their strategic planning, if that's different in any way or
Yeah.
specialized.
yeah, I'll check on I don't think that's covered in the recent handbook that the state put out about strategic planning
It doesn't say, I don't think it says anything about technology, but I'm
specifically.
right, but I'm saying that's kind of what we're asking for here.
I wonder whether or not institutions of higher education
Yeah.
might have some of that too. Because it certainly is a leading aspect.
This reminds me that the state is working on revamping the governing boards.
We'll see how much thinner it gets this time.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I think it's pretty good as is, but they're interested in feedback. So if any trustees are interested in giving feedback. now's the time, I think.
One thing I don't think anyone mentioned that is like assistive technology, like for people who are blind or deaf or
And
whatever.
we do have hearing loops at every branch, if not at every public service desk, and at least the circulation desks. And one of my staff does have an interest, an IT staff does have interest in some of that as well. So that is one thing we can.
In the past, we offered JAWS, the text-to-speech software in the lab, but I think our license is probably wrong.
Yeah, so our license expired and I pursued an open source alternative that's currently installed on the accessibility devices in the lab. So like the physical computers in the space. One of my personal goals that I've been pursuing is just adding another accessibility feature each month to the lab, but that's just sort of off the record. Yeah, so I think that is not a current software that we subscribe to, but I think it would be a lovely one to resubscribe to if there's room in the budget for it. Some of those assistive technologies that we even historically got awards for being so accessible in the library system.
I think that's a good point, Peter and Brett. I don't think the JAWS got a ton of usage, but it's the type of thing where if you need it, then where else are you gonna go?
And I think there are some screen capabilities on all the public computers, if I'm not wrong. I'm not mistaken. There might
Just
be
like
some.
Windows native.
Right, yeah, some of the
things,
native
yeah.
accessibility tools, whether or not that's been helpful.
Right, yeah, no, so there's a built-in feature in Edge, for example, to read aloud a website, but it's a little bit less full feature.
It reminds me of the conversations that I heard when every public meeting was going towards Zoom or something like that, and Zoom has text, what do they call it?
Auto caption.
Yeah, auto captioning or whatnot, and the legal advice was don't do it because you can't, if it's wrong, then you're liable for whatever the mistake was.
It's the AI thing.
Same concept.
It's the
My
AI.
favorite closed captioning from a decade ago was the superb owl. Super Bowl, superb owl.
Yes.
I think it's a good start today for a revamp here. Anybody else got anything they want to throw on the table, or Tony?
I did have another topic.
Yeah, all right, go ahead.
I need to run, David, but thanks, everybody.
Okay, see you Monday.
A week from, right?
This
No.
coming Monday.
No, Monday.
Monday.
Very
Oh,
soon.
it's already the 22nd. How did that happen? Okay.
Retirement.
Yeah, I'm saying, complete lack of time. All right, guys, take care.
Thank you.
So this is just a general interest of mine, and it seems to me it fits within this committee, but you all can decide where it goes. But as I saw on your summary of the staff implementation plan, it looks like our current website strategy is, it doesn't say the word incremental, but I'll use it's an ongoing and annual process is what I think I read. And I just wanted to, this website was launched in 2023, and it involved a whole lot of infrastructure improvements along the way, but having observed the process, it was a very long lead from when we decided, hey, we want to work on the next version of the website until 2023, when it was in the fiscal year 2016 plan to explore responsive design, and then the FY17 plan was to plan and budget for a website redesign. And then 6 years later, it was actually delivered. Now, again, I think we've made a lot of infrastructure improvements, that it's not going to be a 6-year process, but it's certainly, in my mind, a 3-year process at a minimum. And I would like to advocate that we have not only our ongoing improvement plan, but hey, when are we gonna, what's the roadmap look like for V3 of the website, the next redesign, where it's been some organization has looked at it from sort of a greenfield, assessed overall, where are we today? What would the next version of this look like, given the changes in technology in between? And I think given the fast moving of the underlying technologies and the long lead time that it seems to take to actually deliver, I think it really behooves us to have a plan for that process to start at some point. And again, it doesn't have to, in my mind, it doesn't have to be only with internal staff. I think we would engage, just like we're going to engage architects and so forth for our central library redesign, I would engage another firm externally, and it's going to require some management and input from internal staff. But I think would be important in our planning process to be able to write that down. Hey, we're going to start this process. When are we going to start it, and how long do we expect it to take? And be looking forward. So I'd like to have a dual track of both this proactive approach that I'm outlining, as well as our current approach that I think is perhaps a little more reactive, or again, it's been phrased as annual, or I'm calling it ongoing.
I think that when Sarah and I have talked about this, I promise you 5 years, right? Like, we're not gonna do an entire redesign for 5 years, but to your point, 5 years is now 3 years away, and it takes time to plan these things. So I think it's reasonable for this committee to develop a framework or to talk about what that should look like as part of the ongoing work of this committee. That seems reasonable to me.
Sure. The average lifespan for a nonprofit website is around 10 years.
10 years.
Well, that's because it does take a lot of man hour and funding to make this happen. Manpower and funding, more than power. To your point about the time frame that it took for this one, when the project was really started and my position was created, there wasn't a web designer position until 2018. So until 2018, there wasn't a dedicated person to even make this happen. And once that started, so that was only, well, that's going on 7 years now, but.
Well, 2018 to
but-
2023 is 5 years. It's 5
Yeah,
years.
5 years. And,
Delivery time.
and to be fair, we did have a pandemic in the middle, but that being said, the site that was being turned over and revamped and reevaluated was going on over 15, 20 years old. So it was trying to get out of a 20-year mindset of all that kind of stuff. So we have the scaffolding or we don't have such a big lift to redo, but the underlying technology and the skill sets to do all that is a bit of a lift. So it kind of depends. It's something to start soon to evaluate, but it is something that most nonprofits I've worked with.
But I just want to reiterate a marker. To me, it doesn't have to be internal resources. We don't need to, the internal resources don't need to be a constraint. Last year, in the last 2024, for example, we received a bequest of $130,000. And the board chose to put that into the family of funds, which means that we're going to incrementally spend 4.5% of that, or $6,000 a year, going forward indefinitely. Great, but we were not resource constrained last year in terms of, hey, we want money for a high impact, important project. The type of thing I would be advocating for in the closer future, just to scope out or understand this sort of plan, would be similar to, or I think analogous to, the architecture design plan for the central library. You get somebody to look, some expert outside organization, come in and look architecturally at the central library. Here's, if you were going to remodel it, here's where the improvements could be, and here's what you would do. That didn't require, to my understanding, a great investment of internal resources. It required some cash, because you paid this.
I mean, it will require, like, that will be a very.
Oh, yeah, once we start
Process.
implementation, once
the A&E starts, like, that's gonna be meeting with those folks.
Absolutely. And what I'm speaking to right now is just the analogy of the architectural design plan review. And I think we could, right now, we don't have a great feel. We have a great feel ongoing, how our users, where are pain points for our current user base. I don't feel like I've seen, well, here's the opportunity of what the next version could look like. What a website architectural redesign review would do is somebody could come and show that to us. Hey, here's some things that you haven't thought about, but we've worked with 50 clients, over the last couple of years, and here's what they found valuable, and get that expertise injection to show us, here's something that you could aim for. And then we would know, or be able to more strongly visualize, what some components of a next version would look like.
So I'm kind of hearing two different things here.
Yeah.
Mike, and correct me if I'm wrong. One is advocating for this body should help to guide and set a plan for what the process should look like for the next version of the web.
Right, timeline and what.
And then I'm hearing some of what you think that process should be.
Agreed that I'm suggesting one concrete, as an example, I'm saying one concrete step we could take is do this sort of architecture or design review. And really my point there was just responding to what I heard from Sarah was I felt like you talked about some of the constraints, the internal constraints that we have. And I guess I'm pointing out that we shouldn't have to be constrained only by our internal staff resources as we're starting the kind of to generate what the plan might be or what versions might look like.
Right. So
That was, and the idea of a design review was just an example of
what it could.
what it could look like, but also where we can do that. That's a step we can take that is not constrained by internal staff resources. It is constrained by funding, but I think there's sources of that. There could be sources of that.
So and I agree, there's a couple of different things going on here. So I would say, first of all, it seems pretty obvious that this is within, like, this topic is within the scope of this committee, right? Like the website is like the, kind of crown jewel of the tech. I mean, it's a incredibly important touch point and way of, way for the public to interact with the library and use the library. And so clearly we should have conversations about the website going forward. In terms of what, and those conversations will include like this, things like, should there ever be a total redesign again? Right? Or is it more of like you're picking elements of the website to evaluate and change, right? So there could be like a brand redesign without touching the information architecture, for instance. And so, I think working through that process is something that will take us some time to educate one another and think through the possibilities. But continuing to improve the website, I think, is something that this committee should definitely be concerned with.
I think to Mike's point about like how long it has taken this organization to move on that front, until we had Sarah in place, basically, who accelerated that timeline.
Well, until you
greatly.
had the position, my predecessor, there's only been one person before me in this position, and she did a great job building it. But right now, the website that we're talking about, which I like to term the web presence, is made of 7 different components. I mean, there's third-party vendors, there's open source software, there's homegrown software, and like you say, there's the graphic design versus the information architecture. There's a lot of stuff, and I skipped through it very quickly because I could go on about this forever. It's my bread and butter. But for 2024, there were these incremental improvements throughout 7 things, plus rebuilding something new. So I would love to have some evaluation about things to improve, and there are open doors for both the public and for staff to be giving this kind of feedback all the time. We have different avenues throughout all the sites. But yes, it is saying the website is kind of oversimplifying what is a very large presence.
I think, and we were talking about Trimba earlier, for
Yes.
some people, that's the main way they interact with our website.
Right.
Presence, right?
And-
They want to know, like, when is the thing for my family?
And that is one feature. It's kind of like we mentioned, we have 3 years left of that renewal, contract renewal. If we were to evaluate that, now is the time to start asking, what features do we like and not willing to give up? What features are we, do the patrons like and not willing to give up? And what other tools are out there that satisfy those needs and desires? So, and we have 3 years to figure that out. And then how can we implement that? And how is it smooth?
So that's really interesting because there's like there's right, one way of approaching this is, as Mike has kind of brought up, like, right, we could do some kind of evaluation or survey or get experts in to do that or what have you. And that would be a kind of like, here's what we think should be improved. But then there's this whole kind of roadmap of what things are, what would be the, from a timing perspective,
Yeah, what's expiring.
where would be a good place to focus now?
And just so you know, all these technology, all these components, the software's outdated. And there's the resources just for that maintenance alone.
Yeah.
So in fact, 2 or 3, or I would say all of them are outdated because these different tools are constantly being updated. And so not only do we have a maintenance part, but then we have this growth part and then about reevaluation. So I completely agree with you. And I think I would love to hear this kind of feedback because it does inform what to focus time and energy on. But again, there are different avenues different ways to see websites.
And so Mike, in your discussion about resources, which, we started a conversation about that. One of the things that I was focused on last year was, Find It is our open source overlay for our catalog, and it's a much better interface in a lot of ways than the classic catalog was. But in the summer of 23, when we turned on the website and we pointed all the links to Find It, which had been there forever for the catalog, that's what we heard the most. That's the main friction point, right? People having trouble because the information wasn't where it had been.
Someone moved my cheese.
Yeah, someone moved my cheese, exactly, right? So we've had problems with, it's, how it is with open source, right? It's like it's free, but then you spend all your time trying to make it work, and it has been less stable than the classic catalog, which is an out-of-the-box hosted by our vendor thing, which almost never goes down, right? So this is a free thing that we sometimes, I saw a ticket earlier today that there was some sort of problem with Find It, and Sarah has to go track down, look through all the logs and figure out what the problem is and this and that. So one response to that we looked at is, well, our vendor, our catalog vendor offers not an open source. They offer an overlay that looks wonderful. It's beautiful. It's not our website, but it's got all the modern features. You can connect it to your meeting room systems if you want. So you can reserve meeting rooms with it. You can connect it to all these. You can do your calendaring with it. Like kind of Sarah described those 7 things. Well, with this product, you could maybe put 3 of them together, but that's not a one-time cost. It's software as a service, and it's
35 to 15, like probably $50,000 extra
a
a year.
Yeah. So
Plus, they'll be tweaking it every time you turn around.
and it doesn't get cheaper over time.
Right.
So I think that's one possible path that maybe this, I'd like to talk about that and look at it and see, like, okay, well, that means though, probably like committing annual operating resources where the board will have to make decisions about, so Sarah has been advocating for a part-time position to support some of these things for several years now. And the personnel committee is always very supportive of it. In the last few years, it has kind of died in the process because we're strapped for operational resources for moving our pay scale and for hiring. We're not adding a lot of new positions. So can we come up with that $50,000 a year for this instead? These are the hard kinds of conversations
Right, well,
the board will have to have.
I mean, as you're saying that, I have very mixed feelings about the sort of vendor solution, but
Yeah.
if it eliminates the need for the position, it's
Right.
funding from one bucket instead of a different bucket.
So that's the type of conversation
Right.
where I think
Yeah.
that maybe this committee could help educate the full board, like we could do the work and then come back with a recommendation for the full board on like, here's the way to
And so,
move forward.
right, an important thing going into this will be figuring out how to prioritize, partly based on timing, like what's just timely for the staff in terms of like, we have to deal with this now, but also like importance, right? So in my experience with public libraries, right, the catalog and the events calendar are by far the most important things to the public, right? And so it's good that we're talking about both of those. And I just want to raise one other thing, which we haven't talked about, which is cybersecurity, which would probably fit in within a technology committee's purview. And it's on my mind because my websites were hacked last weekend, and now I've managed to get it all sorted out, but some hacker in China, kind of got in. And And I learned now that passwords have to be at least 12 characters now, where they can get in like that. So, right, that's a very important issue for all of this stuff.
And in some ways, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and how are we like opening ourselves up to those vulnerabilities by not like replacing equipment that's past its end of life?
Critical hardware or software.
Right.
Yeah, and in some ways, we are able to outsource the worries about that, like, okay, we will have this vendor take care of this resource for us, and they're supposed to take care of that. And that works until it doesn't. And right now, we probably have 10 to 15 scenarios like that, where it's like, oh, okay, this thing is controlled by this group, or this is controlled by us, or this is in the data center, or this, and we know everything that we know that could take it down.
Yeah.
But something new will be there tomorrow. So yeah, that's a good point.
And we have a platform for testing staff on like fish
I
and
love it.
tips.
Yeah.
They've gotten good. Sometimes I think it's legit. Nope, that was a fish test. But like, and there's a training platform part of that we haven't quite explored as much, but I think it's there.
It's called
I
no.
kind of would like to return to what you were saying about needing additional staff. And I think that's something that is really critical, even if we get another piece that can manage these other pieces. What I'm hearing is that we've got a lot of people who are doing 1.5 jobs or more, and even getting whatever that $50,000 piece was, I don't see that really reducing the load. Because what I'm hearing is staff is phenomenally overloaded. So I think that really is something that has to be addressed.
And the other side of that coin is comp for the staff that we are getting, because the things that we're asking, especially this group of employees to do on the open market, their skill set they're getting triple to quadruple what we can offer. We're never going to be able to keep up with, the tech companies or whatnot, but we need to be able to offer a living wage for people. And, we've got good benefits and things like that. So I think those are two sides of the same coin. Like, yes, needing more staff, but also being able to appropriately compensate these very skilled individuals and not rely on what's the phrase I use? Just
The altruism.
their belief in the
Oh.
mission. Right?
Vocational.
Vocational awe, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I think what I was hearing was this one particular tool would help streamline stuff. But I just wanted to underscore the fact that we really need to look, as you say, at the compensation level, but also at staffing.
Agreed.
And like candidly, when I interviewed for my position, it was pitched to me as a hydra that like knowingly had 3 heads. So it was at least 3 jobs.
That was the selling point for
No, it's a disclosure.
Yeah.
And I think that's, especially for like the services that like my department offers, it's always an addition onto their already full plate.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful resource for our community, but it is always a full job person's job, an extra on top of that.
And I would imagine that you're already doing this to some degree, but I think in making the case for increasing the pay scales, emphasizing that there is a strong technology dimension to being a library and providing library services seems like it's important, because I think that people's prejudices would be like, oh, you shouldn't need to pay a librarian that much. But they sort of get that technology people should be paid well. And so I just feel like, making that case.
I think that's a good point. I think we have tried to do that.
Yeah.
Depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
I think this was a very useful conversation.
So how do we end?
Do you want to set a next meeting, or do you want to do that via email?
Let's
Mike said not 6 times a year.
Yeah, let's do that by email.
Okay.
I do think we need to recognize that the stuff that we just scratched the surface on today, like any one of these topics, we could spend easily, I mean, more than one meeting on, so I just think we need to be strategic in setting the agenda going forward.
And I think what I heard was that we'd like to spend the next meeting kind of setting a scope.
Yeah, maybe if we talk about scope and priorities, right? Like if we could work on both of those together so that then that would help us set the agendas of subsequent meetings.
That makes sense to me.
So do I just say I make a motion to adjourn? Is that how this works or?
We're pretty loose in
Just
that.
bang
the
this
committees,
committee's just,
I think we could just say.
Yeah,
right.
Thank you all.
Peter, what is your site built in? Is it in WordPress?
Yeah,